Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership for TEPSA. Each week, I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another, and invite them on to tell a piece of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I'm thrilled this week to have my special guest and great friend, Brad Gustafson on. Brad, tell everybody a little about who you are and where you're from.
Thanks, Todd. So good to be with you. I know we talk often, but as soon as you reached out to me, I've been looking forward to this conversation and just connecting in a video sense since we set it up. So it's great to be with you and connect again. I'm Brad Gustafson. I'm a principal in Minnesota. My wife and I have three incredible kids. I love lots of different things. I love reading. I love Legos. I love creating. I love designing. And probably the thing, aside from my faith, that's defined my life the most is just loving helping kids. I've always had that since I was a wee little lad, and even growing up as I got a little older and into my college years. Like at birthday parties and just things, I would be the young adult who would be off away, like whatever, having squirt gun fights with kids or kind of taking care of the nieces and nephews and things like that. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Well, you're definitely still doing that kind of stuff. I know for sure. And I'm so jealous. I can tell you're at your cabin because I see that beautiful bookshelf that I've seen in many pictures online. I'm so jealous of
I
your
love a
design
bookshelf.
idea with
It's
that.
been a dream of mine to have a bookshelf, and it's so cool to have that. Sometimes I just climb the ladder just for fun. I was hoping to have
I
the
would too.
fireplace in the background, but my kiddos are huddled around that, so I got kicked up to the loft.
That's awesome. Well, Brad, I want to start with kind of your journey. When you were growing up, did you know education was going to be down your path?
I don't know that I did. I grew up in a household that valued education. My
Mhm.
mom was a teacher, mainly fourth grade for many, many years. So I got to see that life from a kid's perspective. I got to spend a lot of time in classrooms, and I still remember her colleagues. Summer school. I always remember being partially bribed, like if I was really well behaved while she was teaching summer school, and I went and helped her pack up at the end of summer school. Like one year, she went and took me to a tackle store, and I got to pick up my own tackle box. Just little memories like
Mhm.
that. But I think when it boiled down to, if I'm being completely honest, I had that core kind of in my DNA of wanting to help kids, but also being able to relate to them or care about the things that I think they care about or understand that to a certain degree. So that was a driver. But I think I just kind of grew into, like, the more I learned and then signing up obviously for education classes, then you just fall even further in love with it. And you're like, yep, this is it. This is what I was made for.
So you're having a great time teaching. You're doing well at it. You're enjoying it. And then when does that point come where you decide that, you know what, maybe administration's the next step for me?
I love that question. So I remember so vividly, Todd. I'm a second grade teacher and absolutely loving it, and kind of thinking I was doing a decent job at it. And then our principal came in one day after school and had a brochure in her hand, and her name was Jan, and she was awesome. She's like, "Here, I think you'd be good at this." And I was like, just clueless and kind of like honestly, my inner thought, I didn't say it out loud, but it was like, am I doing something wrong? Like, why would I want to go to principal school? But I have this dorky thing I know a lot of educators have where you just like learning. So I
Mhm.
honestly signed up for principal classes, or what, that's not what they call them, but I signed up for, I already had my master's degree at that point. So I got a specialist degree, but it was just to keep learning and reading and all that stuff. It's kind of an expensive hobby. But over the course of that, I remember vividly, my wife is, who you know very well, is very wise. She has like 99% of the wisdom in our family, and every once in a while I'm able to chip in
Yes.
like 1%. And maybe that's an exaggeration, right? Like maybe I chip in half a percent.
Right.
But I remember asking her, like, should I just take the classes and then not do the principal internship hours, because I don't, that's not really anything I aspire to do. I love teaching. And she said, and it's advice that I think still rings true today, like, don't limit God. Like,
Yeah.
do follow the program, and even if you don't do that, that's okay, but don't limit God. And sure enough, I'm glad that I listened to her, because I love being a principal, it's absolutely incredible.
Well, and I've had the pleasure of getting to visit your school and meet some of your team, and I just love the work that's going on there because you can tell that y'all are truly passionate about kids and providing unique experiences for them. And one thing that I heard you mention is, just your own personal love for learning, and you've also just continued on that path, and you got your doctorate, and so I know that's a very narrow group of people who can actually complete all that because it's so intensive. Throughout that process, what do you think is something you learned about yourself while getting your doctorate?
Hmm. Todd, I've known you for a long time, but you ask really good questions. Jeez. So I think one of the things is just understanding, and I wouldn't have said this maybe 5 years ago even, but like hobbies and passions can change and evolve.
Yeah.
And like defining yourself and your identity by one thing and thinking it will always be that is probably a little bit limiting. So here's an example. For the longest time, ever since I was a kid, I loved woodworking. And I just can remember like hanging out in my dad's wood shop. And this will sound really dorky, but smelling the sawdust and building and creating and problem solving. And I did that for many, many years. But over the course of going to school and my doctoral program and stuff, I actually kind of fell in love with writing and I think it relates or it overlaps a teeny bit. And I don't know if it's the problem solving, because there's actually a lot of problem solving with woodworking and putting things together. Part of it's the creating. I consider myself creative
Mhm.
in a sense that I like building things, whether it's building with words or wood or systems or
Right.
scheduling or trying to help people. I think it all kind of is in the same vein. But what I've learned about myself is that I love writing, and I guess I consider myself a writer now too. And I
Mhm.
closely connect that to woodworking in a really
Right.
strange way.
I love that. That's such an interesting perspective. And one thing that I know that you and I both are constantly on the learning path of is the idea of balance. You are a successful principal, you are an author, you do speaking, you have children at home, you have a marriage, you've got all these things. How do you balance it or do your best at balance? I know it's a continual learning process, but
Yeah, and I think this probably would apply. That's a question that probably everyone is asking themselves, or
Mhm.
from time to time has asked. For me, what's worked well is having great open communication with my wife and high school sweetheart. And like, so when I'm failing and not being as balanced as I should
Mhm.
be, because part of my challenge is I get passionate about a lot of different things, and I don't usually do anything halfway. So if I'm
Right.
excited about whatever the 30-second book talk global video project that I've collaborated with Jen Lagarde on, or whatever it is, I will go into it headlong and love it, and like it fills my bucket. Meanwhile, my family and kids will be sitting there with their buckets, like, "Hey, what about us?" Right?
Mhm.
But so here's the cool thing that's happened from time to time is just Deb having really open conversations, like here's where we're at, Brad. Here's where we're feeling, and then
Mhm.
me, this isn't always my first reaction or instinct, but like be humbling myself to be really
Right.
open to that and caring enough to actually make adjustments. So that was a really probably a weird answer, but just
No.
being on a great team and being really
Mhm.
responsive to what my wife and family are telling me, and realizing that I don't have it all figured out. And when I make a mistake, that it doesn't have to be a mistake that I keep making with regard to balance. But even on like speaking stuff, the filter always goes like, can I keep doing my number one job? Like, will the
Mhm.
people at home be okay with me taking on this, going to X, Y, or Z?
Right.
And if the answer is yes, then filtering through, okay, so then I also am a full-time principal and 100% committed to that. Will it work for that? And a lot of
Mhm.
times I have to say no, as I'm sure you have in the past
Yep.
too. Like if it's workshop week at school, like
Mhm.
my team counts on me to be there. So the answer is no, I can't go do that. And then if it does work out, just trying to balance that and have it be where I can be fully present at work and then try to go help or make a difference somewhere else.
I think that's a really well thought out plan. I think, and you've got to have those people in your life who are going to hold you accountable. That you can listen through a lens of they're only holding me accountable, they're not attacking me, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I think that's really important to know. Well, Brad, you and I have been best friends for a long time. I mean, we know a lot about each other. So I've got a couple really hard hitting questions for you. that I feel like I can ask because I know you a little better. So the first one is, when did you decide that you wanted to be a professional foodie Instagrammer?
Todd, I just
Because
think sometimes.
just to interrupt, so just to give all the listeners and viewers some preface over that. So anytime Brad and I hang out together, we like to take pictures of food that we're eating, and Brad is a meticulous photographer. It doesn't matter if it's a selfie or if it's a group photo or if it's a food photo. And Brad and I are both also very competitive, and so there have been several instances, I will admit, that Brad and I both posted photos of our food and tagged the restaurant, and the restaurant has shared Brad's photo
It's
because it
true.
was so well done. But I mean, obviously photography is something you love, but especially with food, because I know you just recently shared a video online of you robot dancing while cooking food and pancakes, and you're always sharing food and stuff. So when did that become something that was
Yeah,
important
I
to you?
just think that restaurants and the food industry, they just notice and they find talent. And so as I'm posting, it's like this magnetic force, Todd. And I'm hoping one day they'll kind of start to notice your emerging skills in the food photography area. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Well, I'm always taking great pointers from you. So that's, I mean, I just think viewers want to know because we always see you cooking. So since we do always see you cooking, what is one of your favorite meals to cook?
There's so many meals that I like to cook. We have this joke in our family, and our close friends have kind of started to adopt it. Anytime I cook something, I just nickname it world famous. So world famous quesadillas, world famous hamburgers, and I don't. Obviously, it's not really world famous, but it's fun to say that. I love cooking quesadillas, and I always joke with Jimmy Casas that I could outdo Mama Casas's
Oh,
quesadillas.
that's
Yeah, I
good.
know those are fighting words, right? But that's a fun one for me. Burgers. I also like Googling restaurants recipes because a lot of kind of knockoff recipes are
Yeah.
out there. So people are going to mock me I like Applebee's, and for some reason my family doesn't like it as much as I do.
Your friends
But
don't
like,
like it either, Brad.
I know, but they have a cool quesadilla burger. At least in Minnesota they do. So that's one that I like making every once in a while. I like they're even Applebee's, the seasoning they put on their fries. I googled that, and now I use that same combination of salt, pepper, and garlic on seasoning burgers and
Oh, I
potatoes at
love it.
home.
I love it. So my next hard-hitting question is, a lot of my viewers are other educators, and they all have friends that they go on trips with and vacation with, and I'm sure they've rented like little houses or Airbnbs and stuff. And so when you're going to stay at an Airbnb with friends and you're the first person to check in, what is something you enjoy doing?
That is one of the best questions ever. So
I
do I
doubt
do I
anybody will ever ask you that
do
on
I
a podcast.
dare tell the story? So I just have to say it. This is like tell your story, right?
That's
So
right.
one of my favorite moments in life was Deb and I always love hanging out with you and Liz, and you always arrange really cool places to stay. So this Airbnb that Todd booked us, it was multi-level. Liz and I had Todd and Liz had their own like suite or whatever, and Deb and I rolled in early. Our plane arrived early, and I had packed this gay gift that someone had given me and Deb on our wedding day. It was a red, white, and blue Speedo because we were going, I think, to the Dominican Republic, so they wanted me to have an American Speedo. Anyway, I snuck up to your guys' room before you got there, and I just slid it under the covers, kind of pretending like the maid service or the people didn't whatever clean the room, or it was left there, and
So let me finish the story from here for all of the listeners today. So Brad and Deb do this, or Brad does. I don't know if we want to accuse Deb yet, but they do this, and Liz and I had no idea. And my wife, like Brad, is a germaphobe to the extreme. Like anytime we hang out, Deb and I are always like, "Oh, there goes Liz and Brad again." They always have their sanitizer and paper towels on doorknobs and everything like that. And so we check in, we hang out the whole evening, we go head up to bed. Liz throws up the covers and she says, "Oh my gosh, Todd, there's clothes it's underwear And I go and look and I'm like, it's a Speedo. And she's like, they didn't clean this place. This is why I don't like staying in Airbnbs. This is so gross. I'm not sleeping in this. And I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. It was a Speedo. Like, throw it out and then just sleep in pajamas. And so she was so mad. She slept on top of the covers, fully clothed, couldn't sleep at all because she just knew she was going to get some disease from this Speedo. Never once crossing our mind that someone of our friends had planted it. And so Liz was like, do we tell them, like, I don't even want to stay here anymore? Like, this is so disgusting. So the next day, we're just sitting there at breakfast, and Liz and I couldn't decide if we wanted to tell y'all or not. And y'all hadn't given any clues that you'd done anything. And so finally Liz was like, we found something really gross in our bed, and I think we need to call them to have come and clean it. And y'all are like, what did you find? And so we told y'all, and you're like, oh yeah, we put it there. Y'all didn't know that. And Liz and I were like, we're going to kill them because we didn't get any sleep. We had a marital dispute in bed about whether or not it was that gross. And it was all because our friends planted the dirty, well, it wasn't dirty, the Speedo in the bed and never told us or checked in and said, hey, did you find anything in your bed? No, they let us be punished all
my
night
jaw
long.
hurts from laughing and smiling so hard right now. And the other part of the story is that night, as we're waiting for like some big reaction, because Deb and I are on this separate floor in the Airbnb, every minute or two, and then as it got a little later, every 5 minutes, either she or I would just bust out laughing because in our mind we're thinking of this. It was the most, we didn't get much sleep either, but it was because we were laughing alone.
Well, yeah, so that's definitely one of our most fond memories. I'm not sure that we have stayed in an Airbnb since, just to be clear,
Yeah,
because my wife was so traumatized by what you did. So thank you for that.
That's a great memory. I forgot about that.
So switching gears completely from the hard-hitting questions, we'll go into a couple more softballs now. You know, you have quite the passion with literacy. I love discussing books with you because the way you interpret them, the way you connect with them is so different than so many other people that I talk with books about, because you truly, like, when you're online sharing books, you're not just being like, hey, I want to share books. Like, you have really connected with these. You have great images you share when you give them the Bradsky Awards. You do this Read Right Now with Jennifer Lagarde every week. You have a 30-second book talk that you do sponsored by Scholastic. I mean, all these fantastic things. Has reading always been a big force in your life?
Quite honestly, no, I don't think so. So the interesting thing, this is a really weird thing, and it kind of goes back to the idea that passions can evolve and change and always be open to new things. But I used to have, and still do to a certain extent, like a strong passion for technology and innovation and connecting. And I think that's honestly where the passion for literacy and reading started, which I know sounds really weird and backwards, but it was, I love like connecting people. I love learning and collaborating and sharing ideas and building better things together than we might be able to do alone. So in taking that passion for connecting or connectedness, Jen and I started, this was several years ago, but an example of kind of how it started, like, what if we connected around books? So it was almost like a connected pedagogy was the driver, but then the literacy was kind of the insert. And over time, it's weird how it flipped. Still believe in connectedness and relationships and innovation and new ideas and collaboration and all that, but literacy has risen to the forefront of something like that I almost eat, sleep, and breathe. It's just part of my identity now, as opposed to just being looking for innovation.
I love that. And like I said, I truly can feel your passion when you talk about it. It's why I love like being able to recommend books to you, because I'm like, I think I know like really what Brad's into right now. So if I recommend this and he loves it, then I know I'll have somebody else to talk about it with, because you're one of those that you're like me. When we finish a book we love, like, we need to go tell people about it because it was that moving for us.
Yeah, you recommended one of my you nail your recommendations, but Scythe was one that you recommended, and home run there, Todd. Home run.
Yeah, Neil Schusterman is brilliant. I absolutely love that trilogy. Well, Brad, thinking about our lives, we all go through all kinds of things in our lives, good, bad, in between. When you look back at your life and all the things that you've been through, what is one of the really defining moments that you think really played a part into creating the man we see today?
I'm going to just estimate here approximately 7 years ago in my current principal role. I'm in my 10th year right now, but about 7 years ago, our school was working through some cultural things together and just trying to grow together. And I had missed, like in my passion for innovation and giving kids new experiences and not limiting them just based on what I was comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
I and trying to emphasize and cultivate that in staff and celebrate that in staff, I had missed out and had gotten some feedback from a few people, a small number of people, but every person matters, that they were feeling like the foundational work that really keeps schools going, the great foundational work, wasn't necessarily being appreciated or celebrated as much.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hard feedback to get because I truly cared about the people that I had, I guess, let down or who weren't feeling as part of us as
Right.
they should have been or deserved to be. And instead of uh, running or not listening to that feedback, I really deeply reflected on it and did some growing myself and have been a
Mm-hmm.
lot more intentional about creating conditions where that type of feedback can
Mm-hmm.
come forward positively, maybe even proactively before I make bigger mistakes and things like that. And over time, I feel like we've grown our team. I've grown and changed, and it's just this really incredible thing where now I almost look at anything through an extra and different lens, and it's that lens of culture. Like, how might this decision impact who we are and who we want to be and where we're going and what we all believe in, and who am I leaving out and whose voice hasn't been part of the conversation yet and might enhance it before the decision is made, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I really think that was a defining moment. But it wasn't just a moment that happened 7 years ago. It's
Right.
something that's alive and well. So something maybe that hurt and was hard to hear and handle initially is something that gives me fulfillment and life right now. And I feel like it helps me serve better, which is important to me.
I love that. That's powerful. Well, Brad, one question I always love to end all of these conversations on, because we got all kinds of listeners who join in, is if there was one thing that you wish more people knew or understood, what would your one thing be?
Dang, man. I feel like these are such great, important questions. I think I'll just go back to that defining moment for me. It's I see this now, Todd, probably more than ever, with the rapid stream of information coming at school leaders and educators from administrators to administrators with the COVID, the
Mhm.
really important work that's being done, and the changing variables and changing mixed conflicting messages. This is a hard time to be a human being, but let alone to be an educator. We're
Right.
figuring a lot out together. So just being really cognizant with every decision that's made, and partly assuming positive intention, but we and especially educators and school leaders, we can't rest on the fact alone that we had good
Mhm.
intent when we made a decision or when we sent a communication out. If we missed the mark or were unclear or could have done better or left somebody out, like, we have an obligation to include them and be responsive to that. So that's kind
Right.
of my takeaway message that dovetails or connects back to the importance of team and the importance of, like, us. There's nothing more powerful than us. And
Right.
when us is lacking in a school, there's nothing more noticeable to the people who are not part of it or who are feeling left out. And the good news
Right.
is we can fix that. We can work together to fix that.
I love that. Well, Brad, you're one of my favorite people, and I love so much that you are one of those people who everything you portray online is who you are in real life. And there's just complete, genuine, and heart and compassion for trying to make things better for kids and adults. And so, thank you so much for the work that you do and for coming on and sharing some of your story today.
Hey, Todd, always great to connect. And thanks for giving me a nice way to end this instead of having the Speedo question be the last question. Thank
Hey,
you.
I tried. I tried. And thank you, everybody, for listening. We're watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts or videos, it is there. Thank you so much for Brad for sharing today. I hope his story has encouraged and inspired you to get out there and tell your story, because every story matters.